In June of 2011, the editors of Adbusters magazine sent out an email to their subscribers. The message?
America needs its own Tahrir.
Word spread. Domain names were purchased, and 3 months later, protesters entered Zuccotti Park. Occupy Wall Street was born.
And it was all done so a few corporate oligarchs, the 1%, could amass personal fortunes in the tens of millions and often hundreds of millions of dollars.
By no means was it the first Occupy, but it was the loudest, the one that caught the imagination of drum circles everywhere. In February of this year, Adbusters released a collection of essays titled Meme Wars, the creative destruction of neoclassical economics. The book is a glamorous attack on late capitalism. It also has no page numbers, and the cover is made out of sandpaper. It gouged into my coffee table. So yes, all very Adbusters. To understand all of this, I needed an expert.
He's one of the most interesting activists in a generation.
A revolutionary.
The shadowy character in the background of the Occupy movement, practicing his dark arts of subversion. Please give a warm welcome to Micah White.
My name is Micah White. I am an editor-at-large at Adbusters magazine. Adbusters is an international magazine for artists and revolutionaries who are trying to change the way that information flows in our society.
First, I wanted to know what the ingredients were for an Occupy-style protest.
At least two things, one of which is you need an idea that captures people's imagination. That you can control, and then the second thing, of course, that you can't control is this element of time that some people call kairos, the ability to launch the meme at the right moment. And that's really what we did with Occupy, is that it was a meme whose time was so ripe that the instant people heard of it, they liked it.
Micah believes we've gained an acute sensitivity for persuasive, self-replicating ideas of all kinds, not just YouTubes of funny cats.
A meme is an idea that is so powerful that people feel compelled not only to spread it, but to also influence and to see their own lives through it.
So with that logic, Occupy was less of a protest and more of a template.
The power of Occupy is that all of a sudden people volunteered to say, well, I'm an occupier, and I think Occupy should go this direction, and then they tried to push it that direction by creating their own memes. And that's why we had a proliferation of things like, in a perfect example is Occupy Sandy. What a meme. What they did is they took the idea of Occupy, which is leaderlessness, and applied it to another thing. That allows the movement to grow in beautiful ways.
You might be asking where Micah is going with all this talk of memes and leaderlessness. Fair enough, he admits he's trying to figure out a new grammar for activism, and it isn't easy. Take the driving force behind their book, this idea of meme warfare.
I think meme warfare is the idea that we should throw contesting ideas out into the world, and that the best idea should be the one that we follow. So for example, in a concrete example of activism, if all the people of the world were going to go after one corporation, well, which should it be? And that's where we enter into this arena of meme warfare. So we say at Adbusters we should believe it should be Goldman Sachs. We think Goldman Sachs is the most evil corporation in the world, and one corporation that everyone can get behind. But other people think it's Monsanto, or it's Philip Morris, or it's these people. And instead of clamping down and having an official dogmatic line like the communists used to do, where no, it will be Goldman Sachs that we go after, we're actually more interested in starting that process of debate about who it should be so that people can decide and that the momentum picks the target organically. I actually, honestly, personally, I don't care if we go after Monsanto or Goldman Sachs or Bank of America first. The point is that we should go after one. And I'm happy to let that be up to contestation with people.
In a roundabout way, this focus on meme warfare also addresses another issue. Think about our response to advertising now, at the rise of truthers, or the comments under any news story. As a society, we question everything, every jingle, every image. Suspicion is, well, our default. But when Adbusters the magazine began in 1989, that sort of media literacy was nowhere to be found.
I agree with you. I think one thing that's really interesting is that Adbusters has since the beginning pursued basically the same position. We need to decommercialize our culture, that the corporations are the primary target, the primary enemy of the people, and that basically we need a bottom-up revolution of some kind. But what's interesting about that is that as time has progressed, basically certain elements of that argument have essentially won. You reference one of them, which is media literacy. The idea that we should all be like conscious consumers of imagery and deconstruct advertising and all this kind of stuff was very new when Adbusters came out, but is now very commonsensical. So too is the idea that corporations are bad. No one really disagrees that corporations are bad or that they are causing horrible things. I mean, you can go, there's thousands of books about them. It's no longer enough to open up, a Playboy magazine like they did in the 70s and deconstruct its patriarchal imagery. That was interesting 30 years ago, but is no longer so interesting.
Looking back at the events at Zuccotti Park, that email sent on a June so many years ago, I was, curious what Micah thought of Occupy's promise and eventual implosion. Was Occupy Wall Street a success or a failure?
One of the main take-home messages of Occupy Wall Street was that global revolution is far more difficult than any of us had anticipated. I think the working assumption of almost all activists was that if you had a large number of people, maybe a majority, and if those people all said something in unison, then our governments, representative governments, would have to agree. But what Occupy showed is that you can actually launch a movement that pretty much everyone agrees with, the basic message, which is that we want greater democracy, and yet that alone is not sufficient to get the change that we seek. So when I say that Occupy was a failure, I agree with you in the sense that it was a constructive failure because it showed us the limitations of our own tactical thinking. And as we move forward, one of the things that we've learned is that global revolution is far more difficult, but at the same time, we are on the right track. The idea of leaderless revolution and horizontalism was correct, even if it did not lead to a decisive victory.
Micah White is the editor-at-large at Adbusters. Meme Wars, the creative destruction of neoclassical economics, is in stores now.